I'm your host, Bria Woods, and today we are joined by a truly distinctive voice in contemporary jazz, vibraphonist, marimbist, and composer Patricia Brennan. She was born in Veracruz, Mexico, and she's now based in New York City. And Patricia is known for her fearless improvisation, her innovative use of electronics, which I'm really excited to talk about more as well, and the deeply textural soundscapes that she creates on the vibraphone. And so today I'm really excited to talk about her new album, Breaking Stretch, which is a stunning exploration of tension, transformation, and sonic freedom. And we'll also be talking about some of her early influences, her creative process, the stories behind her music, and her upcoming album, which I'm really excited to delve into. But without further ado, welcome, Patricia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing? Are you in New York right now?
I am not. I am in Connecticut right now. I like to escape the city whenever I get a chance to, especially in the summer.
Yes.
But yeah, I normally am based in Brooklyn, New York.
How are you
Mhm.
feeling about the reception for Breaking Stretch so far?
I mean, I'm just really happy about it, and I think, you never know what to expect. But one of the things that I always, I guess tell to myself is I don't really try to expect anything. Yeah. But I think, one of the things that I always talk about with this record, but also, my previous record and just all my work in general, I try to really connect to those elements that attracted me to music in the first place when I was a little kid, and it was just that kind of magnetism that you get from groove, from rhythm, from just the energy that the music creates, regardless of what style it is. So I try the best I can to reflect those elements in my work, of course, in combination with, some of the creative influences that have affected me or touched me throughout my career. So to know that it has been received this well is actually, in a sense, a reassurance that those, I guess my theory that those are the elements that can connect with everybody, not just jazz fans, but also, everybody that just loves music. So yeah, I'm just really happy that in a sense, that theory continues to be confirmed, and that it just connecting with so many people, which is, is really beautiful to me. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more about those early influences and the inspiration that you're drawing from in your music. And so you were born and raised in Veracruz and
Mhm.
Mexico. So can you paint a picture of your childhood? What music did you grow up listening to? The sounds, the food, like what was home? What did home feel like for you?
Oh yeah, I talk about all the time. My husband hears it all the time. But yeah, I mean it's an interesting place because, not many people know about it in the States. I mean, I've realized more and more whenever I'm from Mexico, I'm from where are you from? Mexico City is like, no. I'm from Veracruz. So Veracruz is a coastal city. It's on the in the ocean, and I think there's something special just starting with that. Just my connection with water and with the ocean. I just need to be close to it. But just, it's very special. So Port of Entry technically is supposed to be the first town founded in the Americas after the Spanish came to the islands in 1502. So it's really, really old. And because of that, it has all this influence from all the immigration that has gone through Mexico. And that has been the port of basically the first door or the entry door to the country. So all those people passing by have left an imprint in the food, in the music, in the way people look in that area in Mexico. So it's just really for me it's just it's the best place ever, and not because I'm from there. So starting with with the music, the music has an interesting mix. So there's local music that you hear basically everywhere, and that's something that I always talk about. Where like even if you didn't like music, you couldn't just go away from it. It's just literally everywhere. You walk down the street. There's marimba bands carrying a marimba, going from business to business, restaurant to restaurant. There's this famous place where literally there's like five bands playing at the same time. And
Wow.
then sometimes they take turns. So it's really interesting. And it goes from son jarocho, which is the traditional music from there. That music, for example, has influence from Native Mexican, Spanish, African influence as well. And it shows into instrumentation and the rhythm of the music and so on. So I mean, my first musical memories have been even just watching these groups in the
Hmm.
park. My mom's business was literally a block away from the main plaza, so my grandma would take me there. And there's the son jarocho happening, then there's a Cuban song band right next to it, and there's a salsa band over there. So music literally is everywhere. And even if you're not a musician yet, I think it's bound to happen that eventually you're going to end up being one either professionally or not. Um, so the food, same thing, it's lots of, seafood, but kind of, in a sense, Mediterranean influence, but also has, this kind of very old recipes from native Mexican
Hmm.
um, traditions, lots of Spanish influence in that area. So it's very different than the rest of Mexico.
Yeah.
My dad is a amateur Latin percussionist. They're both engineers, but he just used to have this rumbas at the house every weekend, basically. So since I was very little, he always be like, "Hey, come over, play this or play that, or you learn how to dance, or this." So it's it was a really interesting, fun upbringing, and in a sense that you don't realize, it just it's one of the things that you do as part of your life. It's not like, oh, music is a special thing. It's just like everything becomes part of the same world. So yeah, music was around me at all times. My grandmother's a concert pianist, and we used to live in what used to be her house, so her piano was there, and she will still come over and practice. So
Wow.
that was going on in the house too. And then another thing that I was very lucky is in our town, which is just a few blocks from my house, there's a conservatory, which the way music education works in Mexico, it's a little bit more like I guess versus Latin America, but also in Europe, where you don't really have music in public schools or private schools. You have conservatories, and they have programs that start since you're really young. You're 3 years old until you get to 17, and then you pass to the professional level. So I had that going on a few blocks from my house. So my mom eventually knew or saw that I had interest in music, and also was convenient for her to leave her child somewhere. She went
Right.
to work.
You need something to do.
Something to do, and they keep you busy. I mean, I was there since, I mean, the first years from 3 to 5 wasn't super long. It was maybe from like 2:30 to maybe 5:30,
Mhm.
which is still, pretty intense for a kid that young. But then as soon as you turn 6 years old, it gets really intense. Like I was there until 10 p.m.
Oh my
It
goodness.
was from 3 to 10 because you have all this whole curriculum, classes, orchestra rehearsal, painting, dancing. You have all the different things at the beginning, but then specializes more in music. So it was perfect for my mom. But so that really was a huge part of my upbringing because it really puts music in a whole other, perspective and very structured, very disciplined at the time. I don't know what it is now, but we used to have this older, Russian, Polish immigrants teaching there, and Cubans. I had a lot of Cuban teachers that will. There's a lot of a big Cuban community in Veracruz, which is why Cuban son is huge down there. Salsa is huge down there, and also Puerto Rican from Dominican Republic, but mostly Cuban. Cuban is a big community down there.
Right.
My great grandfather was Cuban, so there's all these people that kind of converge there, and the music scene also reflects that from the conservatory side, but also the I guess what we call it the street music,
Mhm.
which is the rumbas, son cubano, son jarocho, all these different traditions. So
Right.
so I'm trying to encapsulate it all into a short answer. But I always
Yeah.
tell people, if you get a chance to go there, go to Veracruz, the port of Veracruz, and then you'll see what I mean. It's a
Yes.
very different place than the rest of Mexico.
And so you no, you didn't start with the vibraphone. What did you start playing when you were at the conservancy? Um,
It was, I started with piano at 3 years old.
wow.
So piano was my first instrument. Partially, my grandmother used to practice there. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. But she was not a great teacher. So I think was one of the reasons why my mom was like, okay, you're gonna go to the conservatory now. Also, I think as part of the conservatory, I guess, structure, everybody has to start with piano no matter what.
Mm.
But I actually did wanted to play piano. And on the side, I mean, there's Mexican marimbas, a Mexican marimba tradition in Veracruz. So Mexican marimba, there's two main regions. There's the southern border, like Chiapas, has a huge tradition in Mexican marimba, but then Veracruz has this other branch of it, and they're different in the sense of repertoire that you play on it and the music that you listen to and so on. So I had a mini marimba in my house since I was like four. I think my parents were, but I didn't really like have like formal lessons at that age. I started percussion lessons at 6 years old. But before that, my dad had this Cuban song band and he had rumba, so I would play percussion in this group with him, and his friends. So percussion was kind of, in a sense, my second natural choice. So when you turn 6 years old in this conservatory, you have to choose a second instrument. So I was like, oh, percussion. I mean, it's no brainer, So
Right.
so that's kind of when the I guess the percussion element came into place. But actually mallet percussion, which is marimba, xylophone, vibraphone, and so on, I didn't really start playing that until I was about 15, 16 years old. So
Mm.
it was actually much later, but the fact that I played piano that whole time and I played drums and percussion the whole time, kind of making that connection, it was quite easy. And I started more in classical marimba, which is a different animal than Mexican marimba. But
Right.
so I start with that, and then eventually vibraphone comes into the picture because when you go to college, like any percussion program, like you have to play some kind of piece on vibraphone.
Mhm.
So I mean later on we can talk, about the transition, but basically once I started to okay, I like improvisation, I want to be an improviser. And in jazz schools, it's either drums or vibes. So I was like, well, I really love melody, harmony, and rhythm. So vibes has everything. So I'm gonna go that direction. But yeah, piano was my first instrument.
And then you studied in Veracruz and university.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did before I moved to the States, I did 2 years of college in not in the port because I'm from the port of Veracruz. The state is also called Veracruz, so it's a little confusing. So I moved to the capital, which is Jalapa, and that's where the professional level of the conservatory is.
Mhm.
And it's part of the public university, which is the University of Veracruz. So I did 2 years there, and partially because I got a job with an orchestra there at the same time. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to college. I have a job. I'm going to move away, away from home. And just an hour and a half away. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And so I did only 2 years there, but then when I moved to the States, I basically restarted my undergrad. So I ended up getting the full undergrad here in the
Got it.
States.
And where did you go for undergrad here?
I moved to Philly first, and I went to the Curtis Institute of Music
Mhm.
in Philly, which, the whole reason, in a sense, why that even came into the picture is because, um, uh, I mean, it's a long story. Long story short, basically, a friend of mine had gone there, and I had no idea about the school, but later on, I found that it was actually a pretty big deal. So it's only 100 students in this whole college.
Oh,
And
wow.
and they only accept one student per instrument, so one percussionist per year. And unless you're a violinist or pianist, maybe they take five violinists or five pianists, but then they have like 800 of them apply for it. So it's a really intense school as far as just being able to get into it. But then once you do, not only you have full tuition, but then they literally pay for everything, because at the time I had financial hardship, I'm coming from Mexico. There's definitely no way that I can afford not only pay for college here, but also, all the expenses of living and so on. So you prove financial hardship, they literally covered every single one of my expenses. So
Wow.
I wanted to leave Mexico at the time, and this opportunity kind of came at that time. It was one of those things that the universe just puts things in your path. So yeah, so that's why I ended up going to the school in Philly, and it was a great experience. So yeah.
Also, congratulations. I know that you were celebrating your 20th anniversary of moving to the US
Oh
August
yeah.
1st, right? 2024?
Yeah, August 21st, that's when I moved to Philly. Yeah, and
Yes.
so actually this year would be my 21st year. But yeah, when I was releasing the record, it was when I was writing the music for it and everything, it was pretty wild because
Yeah.
that was, it was now I'm actually this year I crossed the line of the amount of time that I live in Mexico versus the amount that I live here in the States. And I talk to other people that come from other places, and it's a really weird feeling because it really kind of messes with you a little bit because I'm always like, oh, I'm from Mexico, but but I live in the States now. But now it's like, well, I actually been living here longer now.
Right,
So
right.
am I not Mexican anymore? It's just like it's a weird thing that you have to kind of maneuver in your head. And but yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I became a citizen last September. So it's been yeah.
Congratulations. It's a huge step.
It's been quite a journey. It was pretty emotional getting to
Yeah.
to that place. But
Right,
yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, like you said, what a huge shift. You
Yeah.
talk about it in your liner notes. I believe was it for the tune Sueños de Coral Azul,
Yeah.
and talking about, you said this composition is an ode to an immigrant's journey, the uncertainty, the excitement of a fresh start, but the pain of
Mhm.
behind loved ones, the
Yep.
quest for new relationships, the dream of one day reuniting with the people from the place you once loved and called home. And,
Yeah.
especially right now in this political climate where, immigration is being demonized, perhaps unfairly so, and hypocritically so.
Yep.
Was that also in your mind when you were writing these songs and reflecting on your own immigration journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it's never easy, I mean everybody's path is very unique to start with. And it's, in a sense it's a really weird thing because the uncertainty thing that I mentioned, I'm a very, like you were talking earlier in the interview, like you have all these devices to capture the
Yeah.
audio. Like, I'm that kind of person too, where I need to know that there's safety, like, and living in uncertainty was really tough for me, and I had to really learn how to do that because there's, even if you do it in a sense legally, like there's all these fine prints in every document, like this doesn't guarantee blah 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 blah. So every time you're crossing the border, every time you're applying for a new visa, it was always that feeling of fear and uncertainty, and especially if you're in the middle of a degree or you have friends, it's like that fear that you might lose it all, and so I think that's what I talk about, that uncertainty, that pain, in a sense that you're kind of always living with that in the very back of your mind as an immigrant, no matter what path you took to get here,
Right.
and somehow you find a way to put it in the back because you still need to be creative, you still need to write music, you still need to do all these things, you still need to go to work, you still need to do all these normal things that everybody else has to do, on top of having that thing in the back of your head kind of wondering, so I that's kind of what I was talking about in those liner notes, and when I was writing that piece. But in a sense, it's a duality. There's that pain and that negativity, in a sense, that comes attached to that feeling, but also there's that positivity of just starting, fresh, and also the world is your oyster type of vibe, where, like, you could do anything you want, you could be anything you want to be, and you see that in every immigrant that you meet, especially in New York City. Whenever I meet somebody that speaks Spanish, I was like, oh, where are you from? And then just knowing their story is really interesting, of just, we all have that in common, that kind of fire, and that, really, like, almost, it's not naiveness, but just like you're searching for this dream, and you believe that that dream's going to become true here in this country. So we all kind of come here from this for the same reason. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. So that song has that kind of almost yin and yang thing, where it's like a little bit melancholy and sad, but then has this moments of almost like, the sunshine is coming, and there's light at the end of the tunnel regardless of all this hardship. So
Right. Yeah. And you have collaborated with an amazing range of artists as well. What are some early moments in your career that really shaped your approach to improvisation?
yeah, I think, one of the first, well, there's the first artist that I worked with, I guess, in this vein, was drummer John Hollenbeck, which, he was really, influential to me, in the sense that, I worked with him for a long time. So I saw how he not only led his groups, but also how he dealt with, from writing a new piece to to bring it to full conclusion with recording it and so on. So it was really interesting to learn from him as to how he did that process. And then as I started to work with other people, I was like, whoa, that person was completely different, than this person. So you start to kind of gather as to like, well, that's really effective, that was really effective, and so on. And then you start to kind of see what works for you based on what you learn from other, people. So I really enjoyed, in a sense, being a side person because of that, because it really showed me all the different processes that people use. And also it set kind of a set of expectations that is like, I want to be at this level, that these people are when I release my first record, or when I, take that step of leading a band. But as far as improvisation, there was actually another person that influenced me greatly, which is I was a classical marimbist, and one of the most influential marimbas is called Keiko Abe, which is a Japanese woman that basically, I mean, is super inspiring because she made something of herself in the 40s, 50s in Japan, which is crazy, so and she really brought the classical marimba from being this obscure instrument and maybe you use it in the orchestra, brought it to the forefront and became the first soloist, like percussion soloist, like world-renowned solos with orchestras and solo recitals and so on, which was literally unheard of at the time.
Wow.
So not only that was really inspiring to me to see this, that if she can do it, there's no
Right.
excuse.
Yeah,
But
I actually did not know her story. What's her name again?
Keiko, so Keiko, Keiko
Mhm.
Abe, Abe. And I always just like, it's really incredible, her story. And anyway, the other thing that was really cool about her was like she will write her own music, and then she will also improvise in every single one of her pieces. So this is not jazz necessarily, it was a different type of improvisation, kind of based, kind of created her own language to do that. And also that in itself inspired other composers to write for her, and then to also expand the repertoire for the what is now concert marimba. So that to me was like, I want to do that. I want to write my own music. I want to improvise in my pieces. I want to give solo concerts, and work with other composers and so on. So that's kind of where I guess the bug really became alive, because improvisation has always been around me, like playing Cuban son in Mexico, Mexican marimba has improvisation in it. But like I said, back then it was just kind of more like, this is kind of more what you do, it's part of.
Right.
But once I moved here and I was trying to really search, like, what is it that, like I said, that dream that you have as an immigrant, like I want to do, make something of myself here. You start to really ask those questions, like what direction I want to take. So she was one of those first influences.
Yes. And you've mentioned that your, in your sound is, not only the Latin percussion influence, the salsa records that you heard
Mhm.
growing up, but also listening to Jimi Hendrix, your father's Led Zeppelin records, with your mother. And you can hear that. You can hear, I mean, this is not your mother's vibraphone,
No.
you are doing something so unique and refreshing with the vibraphone that no one else is doing. And so, for someone like me who's not a musician, and for other listeners who may be in that boat as well, how can you help us like try to understand, what does it mean when you use, extended techniques or using electronics on the vibraphone, and when did you start to push the boundaries of what the vibraphone could do and
Yeah.
starting to create your signature sound?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it, is connected at first with those, just the way I grew up, and that was another thing that I didn't mention. I mean, my mom, so she's actually from Monterey, which is not so far from San Antonio, Texas, and when we used to go to visit her parents, we actually used to go to San Antonio a lot, cross the border, and and come back to Monterey. And because of that closeness to the States, they used to have different radio stations and different influences. She became, she loved all these great rock and roll bands, from the 60s and 70s, and kind of brought this whole other, universe of music to my life, and so yeah, Jimi Hendrix, like she loves like every time I go home, she has to put on, something, and she just loves, but just Led Zeppelin, Cream, like all the different, and then even other artists before these bands and so on. But anyway, so I think it's kind of hard to put into words how everything kind of came together, but it really, the more I think about it, is a reflection of all those influences, and also because I was a percussionist. I think percussionists, in a sense, naturally have this way of thinking about music from a different place. We think about sound not so much limited to the 12 note system, but sound is any sound is valid, right? Like shaking a set of keys, or I don't know, like hitting a tile with a mallet, or a different kind of mallet. Like literally, I had played pieces where we go to Home Depot and try to hit on different pieces of
Oh,
wood.
wow.
Okay, we got this one, we got this one. So
I
I
love
think
that.
your perspective of sound, or your sonic perspective, is, I think, is different because it you allow yourself, a greater range. So I think that mindset really influenced me as far as like incorporating electronics and extended techniques and things like that into my plan, because I have the vibraphone. Okay, this is my medium. This is what I do now, and I'm not going to carry 20 other things to add to my setup. So for me, the pedals, were a great way to extend that sonic palette without having to do all this extra specific things. So for me, as an improviser, I think I still think the same way, where I'm searching for a sound that maybe I can't get any longer by hitting the vibraphone the regular way. So I start look for different ways of getting that sound that I'm looking for. So, and that continues, and the sonic palette continue to expand. Depends on what sound I'm looking for, and that also reflects compositionally too, where I want the ensemble to create a certain type of timbre or texture or sound. And like I use the horn sometimes in a very particular way because of that, because I want the horns to sound to create this texture that I maybe I heard in a percussion piece once, but I want the horns to do it. So how do I make that happen? So there's always that process happening. I think naturally it had resulted in me adding all these things to my playing. So
And I noticed that in the video for Palo de Oros,
mhm.
coins, there was this small device that you used with your left hand.
Oh yeah.
What is that called?
It's called a chaos pad. And yeah, and that was interesting because so my producer David Breskin, I think maybe it was the first time we met, or the very first few interactions. He was like, like you should like he was like you should really check out Nels Klein, the guitar player. And and then I was like, well, I really listened to it, and I've been a fan of Nels, but he particularly mentioned, check out his gear, or his pedals and how he uses it and all this stuff. So the Chaos Bag actually is one of the things that he has in his setup. And then actually talked to Nels about it, over the phone, just to kind of, just I was curious about it. And partially it's because I really loved, that kind of almost like touching a record on the turntable, and you get that,
Yes.
that sound,
Mhm.
which actually is another, my husband is a scratch turntablist, which is another influence that has kind of,
Wow.
connected into this. So I became fascinated with that world as well. And also, electronic music was really big as in percussion, classical percussion, because there's Stockhausen, Edgar Varese, they have, kind of done this kind of work already. So I was always attracted to that electronic aspect of music. So then, I am learning a little bit more about scratch turntablism. I was like, I want to really incorporate that sound, because especially scratch turntablism is very drum-like, and literally there every scratch can translate in a sense into a drum rudiment. So I was like, this is perfect, because my music is all about groove, rhythm,
Right.
and incorporating a little bit of that sound. So anyway, so that sound on that chaos pad, it resembles a little bit of that, kind of like scratching over it, and then let's start again.
Yeah.
So I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I dig it. That's so cool. Also, I see your furry friend.
Oh, I know.
I love cats so much. What's
She
your
has to
cat's
make an
name?
appearance. Yeah. Sometimes she comes over here when I'm not paying attention to her. Yeah.
What's her name?
That's complicated. Her name is May from when we rescued her, but I call her Kiki, which in response to it. So it's like, hey, yeah, there it is.
Oh,
There
she's
she
so
is. Yeah.
cute. I love cats so much. I really want a cat, but um,
Oh, now she's gonna settle there. So I guess she's
I'm-
gonna be pretty
she's like, I'll just sit right here.
happy still here.
Do you wanna answer some questions too, Kiki?
Yes.
Um, but first of all, I love the imagery in this
Yeah.
album. As a photographer, that's always something that I'm drawn to. And I really appreciate the thought that you put into this booklet. I love stories. Of course, the
Yeah.
music is, the first, we come for the music, but I'm definitely someone that will stay for the stories because this
Yeah.
is, again, that gift from you to help to guide us into the music.
Absolutely.
And what I notice is you have almost like this, as I was reading the stories about each tune, this childlike wonder
Mhm.
responding to the real things in your life and the
Yeah.
things in your everyday life. And, whether it's the sculpture, the Golden Arbor sculpture,
Oh my God.
at
Yeah.
the Manufacturers Trust Company or the uh, card game that you used to play with your grandmother, Palo de Oros, and noticing the five-pointed star, and
Yeah.
using that as the basis for this, what sounds like incredibly complicated mathematical theory. Again, as a non-musician, I was like, girl, I do not. I had to reread that so many times. I was like, what is happening?
What's going on?
But I guess for our music friends, can you
Yeah.
explain what is happening here? What does this mean? The
Yeah. Like Palo de
very
Oros in particular.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I love composing from that place. Just, every composition really is different as far as you can read in the booklet. Some of them, like Sueños de Azul, was a little bit more of the feeling of the esoteric aspect of inspiration, right? But this one in particular, I have all these different techniques, and when I talk to my students, like especially a lot of them have to do with just numbers. And like I said, both of my parents are engineers, so math was always present in our household, whether you liked it or not. So, but something about, and also, knowing about music in general, music used to be, in a sense, considered, as part of the same academy, like math, music was part of the same thing, So for me, rhythm, in a sense, could be easily, or numbers could be easily translated into rhythm. So anyway, so this piece kind of follows a little bit of that process where, okay, you have the pentagram, 5 points, 10 lines connecting them. So I have something to start with. So what I did first is just mess around with this numbers to create the rhythmic structure of the piece. So what I mean by that is, for example, the ways you can add up to 10. Normally, you think 5 plus 5, that's the first way you think about. So that is one of the ways I do use. But then sometimes I use, 6/4. So I will have claves or rhythmic structures. And when I talk about a clave, sometimes even with musicians, they immediately think Cuban song or rumba clave or son clave. Those are not the only claves. Clave just means literally key, which is what trying to do is a rhythmic key. So it's telling you what is the rhythmic key of this piece. What is the rhythmic structure or skeleton of this piece? That's what the clave is insinuating. So all my music is based on, in a sense, rhythmic clavis, right? So this piece, the rhythmic structure, was built upon those, starting with those two numbers, 5 and 10. So the piece in itself, it may sound complicated. It's in 10/16. That means that each measure has 10/16 notes, but we're not thinking that. And I'm going to get to that. So for me, it's just more to just figure out how to fit everything mathematically, rhythmically speaking, because rhythm is math, is very exact. Quarter note is only one beat, not one and a half, not two, or a half note is only two beats, so it's very mathematical in a sense. But then, once I've figured out all this kind of numbers behind it, at the end of the day, then I really try to think about the balance of tension and release in rhythm, which you can already feel. And this is when I'm talking about how people connect to music. There's something that makes us move with music. And we just move with it. We don't ask what it is. We just do it, right? That makes you tap your foot, that makes you bop your head. So I wanted to connect what is that thing that makes music want to move to a reggaeton piece or to a salsa piece or to a jazz, to more like traditional jazz swing. What is it that creates that? So I started to theorize that is this balance of tension and release in rhythm, just like you have it in harmony and melody. So after all these numbers, I still want to make sure that whatever clave I come up with has that balance of tension and release so people can groove to it.
Right.
So when you listen to this piece, like you can kind of feel like dun 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 ticka dun
Right.
dun 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 ticka, right? So that's not mathematical, that in a sense, eventually you're connecting to that balance, that's that synergy and symmetry that exists in life and in the universe in general.
Right.
You have that tension and release in everything in life.
Right.
So for me, that's the key element. After all these numbers, that's just a way to get started. But that after is just really connecting to like, okay, does this groove? Does this feel good when I play it? If it doesn't, and then it doesn't make sense how the numbers add up, you know?
Right. Right.
So at the end of the day, that really is it's a combination of both things where I'm trying to think, okay, what are the different combinations that add up to 10? Let me try this one. Let me try different combinations rhythmically. Oh, this one has that balance, right? And this one doesn't really work that well. Maybe on paper looks good, but it doesn't really feel good. So at the end of the day, I want people to relate to that. Even though it's in 10/16, you can still kind of bob your head to it.
Right. Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
And this explanation just made it all the more intriguing because I didn't know all this math was going
Yeah,
on behind this, this
yeah,
is over here, grooving.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because it's also just studying other, like countries like Bulgaria or Greece, like their traditional music is in odd numbers. It's in 5 or 7 or 9, and they're just bobbing to it,
Right.
like it's in 4/4. And I think for us, like in Western music, it mostly is 4 or 3/4, and that's it pretty much. So we're naturally, in a sense, used to those kind of even numbers in a sense. So which actually I mentioned there too, because there is one small section in this piece that I do go to 4/4. And I think explaining the line notes a little bit, and the reason for that is 4/4 is more grounded. So like a rock beat, that's 4/4. You feel that ground, you want to step that on every
Right.
single beat. So that ground is, I was thinking about because the symbolism behind this too is the tarot cards. What this means is connected to Earth, connected to the sign of Virgo, which is my sign. And I said, well, and that's also a Earth sign as well. So it's very grounded, and so I wanted to reflect that in a sense numerically by changing this into 4/4 and creating that feeling in the listener, like you really want to stomp down when this section happens and then goes back to the other 10/16 section, and then you feel like you're floating again. But then there's that groove as well. So you can kind of mess around also, with math and reflect in a sense esoteric elements,
Right.
with it too. So that's kind of what happens there as well.
Right. Right. And you also play with the number five and the
Yeah.
555 and also
Hmm.
five suns.
Yeah.
And and so now, the whole theme and I guess ethos of breaking stretch, as you explain, it's like you just said, it's the esoteric. You're breaking not even just the global, but the universal elements and how
Mhm.
all of these elements and things in the universe are inspiring you. But also, I'm reading that you are an astronomer as well,
Yeah.
interested in literally stargazing.
Yeah.
So when did you get into that?
It was, yeah, that's such a one sombrero galaxy.
And the tune, if I'm pronouncing it, Irandel?
Irandel. Yeah, yeah,
Arendelle,
yeah.
yes. Which didn't know about that. Super cool
Yeah.
story. There's a photo in here.
Which is from I believe it's from the James Webb. Either that or the Hubble, because yeah, that's it. I think that might be the Hubble. Yeah, it's and that, some of those photographs were provided. I mean, they're from NASA, so they're and but our photographer, videographer Frank Heath, he did a wonderful job, just also putting that in the video of Arundel as well too.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I've always been fascinated with this since I was a kid, and then I think my dad, he always check out like the NASA website, whenever we finally had internet, which was like, but he was always really into those things, and my mom too. So I mean, they're both very, you know, in a sense, I learned like that wonder like mind. They're both like that too. Where they're always trying to figure things out. They're always trying to, solve a puzzle or things like
Right.
that. So, but anyway, so I've always been fascinated with it. So as soon as I got enough money to buy a telescope, I did. And then, I couldn't wait to really start using it. So I think maybe I got my first telescope. It hasn't been that long, maybe like 20, I think maybe it was after like 2020 or 2021, maybe 2020, but it's been fairly recent that I finally got one. And I just started doing astrophotography this year,
Oh,
which I've been wanting to do that for so long too. I'll
incredible.
share a picture I took a few pictures actually here of the moon, and then a few last week of the star Antares is like looks like Mars, but it's not Mars. Anyway,
Yeah.
but it's just I've always been fascinated with what's out there,
Yeah.
and I think when I was real little, at some point I did wanted to study physics and I wanted to, study math, and have those dreams, but eventually, music took over. So
Right. Right.
but it's always in my music, it is, and the next record, which we'll talk about later,
Yes.
it digs in even deeper into
Right.
those concepts. To me, it just teaches you humility because it makes all your problems and all the things that they're overwhelming you in your life and like, wow, like we are so tiny and this is so insignificant. Like, why am I spending time and stress and
Right. And it also just like, to use your words, stretches your perception of time. When
Absolutely.
I was
Yeah.
reading about Arundel,
Yep.
it lies 28 billion light years from Earth.
That's crazy.
And
That's
it's
so crazy.
twice as
Yeah.
hot and 1 million times brighter than our sun. And so
Hmm.
it's just like, wow, you're right. Here I am, all worried about
Yeah.
whatever. And this star is just doing its thing for beyond what my shelf life on this earth,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is humbling, but it's also just so awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I loved how you captured that sonic wonder of this, what is it?
Oh
WHL013
yeah.
LS, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Arundel, and it's
Yeah.
wow, you translated that so miraculously through music. And I wanted to unpack a few more tunes. Probably my favorite was Mudanza.
Oh wow. Nice.
The
Yeah.
Change. Yeah. And again, bringing in poetry. Again, your inspiration, even though each tune has a different, I guess, origin of
Hmm.
inspiration, it's all under the umbrella of just the wonders of the universe.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
this poem, it's a poem by Mexican poet and Veracruz native Salvador Diaz
Mhm.
Miron.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just ask you, like, I guess I wanted to talk about this one and also Sueños de Coral Azul. Can you walk us through how these tracks came together,
Hmm.
either compositionally or emotionally? But let's
Yeah.
start with Mudanza, States of Change.
Yeah. Yeah. Mudanza. So there's a few things going on here. So first of all, this poem, or I think it was maybe I had a commission a few right before the pandemic where I did this project where I got inspired by different poets from Veracruz, or Mexico, in general. But mostly I was trying to focus from poets from Veracruz. Salvador Diaz Miron, I love his poetry, and this poem in particular, it's kind of pretty dark. It talks about just kind of it's kind of a love story where and it starts with like yesterday, like your smile shine my day, and et cetera, et cetera, and today. the clouds are overpowering, and it's just like the whole world is over. And
It's an
so,
emotional
so
roller coaster there.
like really, really, and also just the Spanish language from that time was so beautiful because it was, I mean, I think naturally it's very embellished anyway, but back then it was just so romantic and so, just so beautiful. So anyway, so this poem in a sense reflects a little bit once again that duality of night and day, dark and bright type of thing, and which is kind of in the whole record, like Sueños de Coral Azul is similar to this one as well. But then the other thing that inspired me, which is, for me, music is also universal. So a lot of my musical influences come from many places, not just jazz or not just Latin music or so on. So in this one in particular, there's a like great composer called Toru Takemitsu, who actually wrote for this marimbas that I was mentioning earlier. But he has all these wonderful works for orchestra and brass ensembles and wind ensembles, and particularly I was focusing on his brass music. So I wanted the septet to sound like a giant brass orchestra. So once again, just like the pedals and the electronics, how can I do that? By having three horn players, no drums, so the drummer's out, right? And the drummers are out. So three horn players, bass and vibe. So that's my instrumentation to work with. And I want this to sound huge, like you have this tuba player playing. So that was the main, I guess, concept that I was following compositionally. So it influenced all my decisions. So one of the things that I did is I put all the horns, which is only three, and they're the extreme ranges. So then instead of having this, sonically, then you get this,
Right.
right? So that amplification creates the illusion of grandeur that you're listening to more than three horns when it's actually just three horns. So that was one way that I started to mess around with it to get to that goal. And then also the bass, I had him use the bow a little bit more in really low notes to kind of create that illusion of that tuba player just going boom, you know.
Yeah.
And that so I thought it was pretty effective as far as creating that illusion. And then the vibes, it was just filling in the sonic space. So I actually added a lot of reverb into in the effects of my vibraphone. So the vibraphone naturally has this vibrato embedded into it, but reverb is different. So reverb adds this kind of almost hollowness or almost like fog, and that's kind of how I see reverb, like that fog, filling in the space.
Yeah.
So I wanted the vibraphone to act in that way in the space to fill in that space because I'm stretching the three horns this way, so there's going to be holes in there to filling that space to then really make it full. So it was kind of this way of using orchestration to create this illusion. So that's a little bit more, I guess, technical, compositionally technical. But again, the goal was the sense of grandeur. Now, as far as the message of the poem, the notes that I chose, they're very kind of on the spectrum of the chords. So create this brightness to it. They're very bright chords, but at the same time they're dark because there's kind of dissonant at the same time. So in a sense, it's that kind of pain, but also wonder that the poem was reflecting. So yeah,
Yeah. It's a beautiful piece. I love the vibraphone.
thank you.
The vibraphone is my favorite instrument.
Yes.
One that I really want to learn how to play. I've been saying this for years that I really want to learn how to play. I mean, I could, I just don't. But it is still a goal of mine. So when we got this in, I was like, oh, yes.
It's
So
very, I mean,
excited.
it's beautiful. It's a very special timbre, and I love it too. It's very unique. You can't pinpoint. There's nothing else
There's nothing
that's,
like it. It just
yeah,
sparkles. It's like, I don't know. It's like if sparkles could have a sound,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know? But
yep,
also
yeah,
it can be hard driving, and we hear that
yeah,
too in your pieces as well. And so Sueños de Coral Azul,
yeah,
that was another huge favorite of mine. I
yeah.
think also the story behind it, it just really resonates with me. And so I guess same question, how can you talk us through how this one came together, either emotionally or compositionally?
Yeah. I mean, in this one to me, it's an interesting one compositionally because it doesn't really. I guess, I mean, I had to compose an end to it in a sense, but I wanted it to feel like it's just this journey, that you're just kind of going, right? And it kind of ends in a sense in an inconclusive vibe because we don't know what's gonna happen,
Right.
like,
Right.
and so in a sense that was again the inspiration is the your journey as an immigrant, right? What you go through, all the emotions, and in a sense the piece I wanted to become like you're literally going through that roller coaster ride and you see all those different things around you. So that was in a sense the vibe of this piece. So this piece is kind of bookended by two I guess chorales on the horns. So it starts with that, just the three horns, just to kind of set up, this and it's something that's more inspired just from just classical music, just having orchestral pieces that start with just the brass or start with just the winds. And like I used to play in this orchestra back in Mexico where the conductor used to love playing Brahms or Tchaikovsky symphonies. And especially Tchaikovsky was so romantic as well. And he had a lot of moments where it's really just the wind section creating this big statement. So I wanted to kind of borrow from that because there's a certain romanticism behind it. There's a certain almost like wondering aspect to that sound. So that's why I kind of incorporate that into this composition at the beginning and also at the end of the piece. There's a certain melancholy attached to that type of I guess orchestration. So but then as soon as the vibes come in, then you're on that road that just never ends. And then it's just basically it's not a loop, but it's just basically we're just jamming
Right.
on that same chord progression over and over and over and over. But every time is different. The horns are improvising, or maybe the horns are doing a little background, and the vibraphone is improvising, then the rhythm section drops out. Then it's just vibraphone alone, which that was actually just a message where when I first moved to the States, it felt like, you had all this stuff happening in your life, and then all of a sudden, zoop, you're back to just you.
Yeah.
I had nobody here. I didn't know anybody in Philly. I met one person who spoke Spanish, and that's it.
Wow.
It was literally all my family was back home, so it really did feel, especially those first few days, like I'm here alone, and one suitcase and just it's just so that feeling is really
Yeah.
it's really crazy because you're like, oh my God, and then you're starting over.
Yeah.
So that was that moment in the piece where all of a sudden it just capsules or breaks down to just the solo vibraphone. So, but then, people start to come in and wiggle in, and that's kind of again that new life emerging in this new place.
Yeah.
So there's those two sides to this piece, where you're back in Mexico, you're thinking about it, the melancholy of missing it, but then the journey starts, all these people in your life, then you're by yourself again, and then it starts over again, all these new people start to come into your life, and it's beautiful, but there's also that uncertain end where we don't know where we're gonna end up, so
Right.
so
The story is still being written.
exactly,
It's still
exactly. There's something about I love opera, and I think also I'm Mexican and I love soap operas.
being
So there's something romantic about just loving just a story that's kind of overly, you know, emphasized.
Right.
So I think operas to me is just like that too, where there's this like extreme, like over the top, emotions about anything, and but there's the storytelling ability connected to visual, connected to even the way people dress, everything. So to me, that was fascinating. So I feel like a lot of my music, in a sense, has a little drop of that, where I still want to create this imagery, this scene with music. And in this case, this piece is another example of that too.
Was there a particular moment during the recording, maybe a sound or, a mistake or a spontaneous choice that surprised you, but that made it into the final album?
Oh yeah, this piece actually.
Oh, really?
So this piece is interesting because right before the vibes are alone, there's this. So we were, I think maybe I wrote like we were supposed to repeat this previous section like 8 times, or maybe somebody was gonna cue, but something happened when we were doing the take where like all of a sudden I hear the horn just ending, you know. And then I was like, all right, it's time to do the vibe solo. But when I listened to it back, it was so organic, and this is the cool thing too, because as a composer, you can plan as much as you want, but it's just still it's still a, I guess, a unfinished canvas, because then you get the input of the musicians that you work with as far as like how they interpret the music, and then that, in my opinion, makes it even better because they take your suggestions and then they just take it to another place. So these guys, they're all really amazing, and they've always been so inspiring to me. And the reason why I chose them is because, I have not only a personal connection with each one of them, but they've just been, hugely influential and inspiring to me since I ever, since the beginning, since I met them, so the kind of decisions that they will make, there was full trust in me, because when that happened, it's just like you just go with the flow, because I know, this was meant to make the music even better, and it did, so when I listened to the take back, I was like, yeah, we don't need to do it again. This is great. Forget about the cue, let's just do it that way. So
Right. And that also speaks to the unpredictability of really kind of like the whole narrative behind Sueños de Coral Azul. It's like
yes.
you buy the plane ticket, you land, and then you have plans, but one thing we know very well is life will challenge and rip apart your plans time
Mhm.
and time
Yep.
again. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to still end up exactly where you need to be.
Exactly. I mean, I remember when I moved here, my plan was not to stay. I wanted to go back to Mexico. I was like, well, I'm going to get a degree here, and then I go back and get a timpani job in Mexico somewhere. But then, as you're here, it just things change. And something, I don't know, that I've tried to tell myself, I maybe it's esoteric, but I do believe the universe has interesting ways to not only give you messages, but also putting the right people at the right time in your path and the right things, and sometimes some things, maybe you're at the moment you're like, man, this sucks, but then years later you're like, oh my God, thank God that happened.
Exactly.
And so I really believe in that. And in this case, in this recording studio, like, or in any situation when I'm playing with people that I trust, and that happens all the time, where maybe you had something in mind that this was going to go a certain way, but they just all of a sudden takes a different direction, and it's like,
Sure.
oh, this is even better than what I thought or what I had, envisioned. So it's a beautiful reflection of that as well.
Mhm. And the album, like you mentioned, explores tension, stretching, breaking
Mhm.
rules, breaking, these tropes. So, what would you say in your own life recently, or maybe in the past, also informed those themes of, tension, stretching, breaking, and pushing boundaries?
Yeah, wow, that's a I mean, I think it's interesting because I think I don't necessarily think about it, but I do, try to challenge myself in I guess everything that, I'm doing in that moment, or at any moment, But I think, that and I've always been this way, and I think this comes from my parents, where my parents just like, I remember seeing them, they had a job right after college, but then both of them, they were like, oh, screw this. Like, I'm gonna do my own thing, And I think there's this kind of almost like, it's not rebel, but it's a certain spirit, that you're always like questioning, okay, well, can this be better? And that's always a challenge, because then you have to figure it out how to make it better, or how to take that next step, and also with improvised music, I used to be a very methodical, and I still am in different ways, but taking risk was tricky, for me, without having a plan.
Right.
So I've learned now to take more risk. Even coming to this country was a huge risk. And leaving everything behind, quitting my job and everything. So I was like, that was one of those first steps of learning how to take those chances, which, in a sense, is another challenge that you're putting to yourself. So that's another thing that I try to do. Always just not doing something just because you're afraid of it, or just just go for it, and then see where it goes, So it's a hard thing to explain, because I think that that stretching, comes to me in that aspect where I have stretched my ability of seeing things and feeling things by just taking a chance on things that maybe I would never have done before. And then just, the breaking, I guess not barriers, but just breaking limits that I had put to myself. And then that limit keeps getting farther and farther and farther away. So we all have that in us. So it's just, I think we're all able to break away from that.
Yes. Yeah. I I'm so excited about your upcoming album Of the Near and Far, which comes out October 24th, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so for this album, your compositional vision kind of continues this same um, thought of,
Yeah.
looking to the stars and the universe for inspiration. And you are joined by another incredible lineup of brilliant musicians, not just jazz, but also kind of blending classical and
Yeah.
alt rock influences as well. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask, kind of explore this album a little bit. So this record, you're bringing together another truly eclectic group of collaborators, from classical string players to avant-garde improvisers. So
Yeah.
what kind of musical or emotional constellation were you building with this ensemble, and how did you know who belonged in that orbit? How did you choose
Yeah.
this lineup?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. And I think all my bands, have this process behind it where I really like, okay, I have this vision. This is the kind of music I think I'm gonna write or I want to write. And then I was like, who would be, I guess, the best fit for it, right? And so in this case it was the same situation, but all my records have explored a little bit of a musical life, and in my musical life, like we were talking about. I mean, I grew up learning that all is valid, so this record focuses a little bit more on those kind of new music, like my past as a classical percussionist. I used to have a percussion quartet back in Philly, and we got to work with really great composers and play really, amazing new repertoire for percussion. There's a lot of, groove and rhythm aspects to this music as well, but it has a different, I guess, orchestration, instrumentation, not so much like salsa bands that you have those brass and so on. Now that was just, it explains the reason why I chose more of a softer palette in a sense, adding the string quartet, adding guitar, adding piano, and kind of getting rid of the horns in a sense, because also in those kind of music, in those kind of compositions, a lot of the instrumentation has those instruments, like Steve Mackey, for example, we have electric guitar, we have strings, we have percussion. The group Eight Blackbird, piano, string, wind instrument, so it's like this kind of different instrumentation. So that informed a little bit more what instrumentation I want to use. I have the vision of kind of what I wanted to focus on. So based on that, I was like, well, now let me choose the players. So this one has two people in particular that I wanted to work with, just because the first one was John Hollenbeck, which I mentioned him earlier. He was my first, I guess, my first employer, and the first person, my first gig, so I wanted to always do something with him, and I was kind of waiting for the right time, and I thought this project would be perfect for him, and he would be a great fit because his background itself, he was also a classical percussionist, but then he studied jazz composition, and he always played drums, different things. So he kind of fit perfectly into the narrative. And then on top of that, he's a great musician, and I looked up to him, for so long working with him. So this is a perfect opportunity to ask him to join this project. Sylvie Corvassier is another one too, where I remember being in Philly and listening to her solo record and being like, wow, like what is she doing with the piano? you know, and that was, again, it was a reassurance of something that I was already thinking of using the vibraphone and marimba in this other way. So this is another opportunity for her to join, because percussion music, like I was saying, sonically is so expansive, right? So any sound is valid. So she does that with her instrument, and I wanted piano, I wanted that instrumentation, so she was immediately the first choice that I thought about. Then I have Kim Cass, which is he's been working with me since More Touch.
Yep.
and Breaking Stretch, and he's just really, I love him. He's such a force on the instrument, but also I just love that he really thinks like a drummer, but he's a bass player.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just so hard to find. And so I can communicate with him like if he was another drummer in the band.
Wow.
And so for me, he's also just a no-brainer to have him part of the project. And Miles Ogasaki, Miles, I worked with him, I think the first time in this project with Matt Mitchell, pianist Matt Mitchell. And I just thought, he can do anything. He can play a melody so lyrically on the guitar, but then at the same time, he can groove his butt off. And so I think he had those percussive elements just like Kim. He can think like a drummer. He actually plays a little bit of drums and a little percussion, and it translates into the way he plays guitar. But also at the same time, if I need him to play a very lyrical, beautiful melody, he can phrase on the guitar really wonderfully. So for me, it was another choice. The strings were the tricky one because I was going back and forth between going a full-on working string quartet or going individual people. And I ended up going individual people, but then by accident, I ended up getting people that have played with each other all the time.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was kind of perfect actually. So I have Motney on violin, who's also an incredible improviser. And he's part of the Wet Ink ensemble, and really well versed in new music, but also improvised music because I needed the string players to be able to improvise as well. And so he fit all the qualifications. Paulo Garcia as well is another great violinist and really well known in the new music community as well. Same thing with Kyle Ambrose on viola and Michael Nicholas. Michael Nicholas, I think he's in Brooklyn Rider, the string quartet. But coincidentally, all of them play with each other all the time. So that actually was super helpful in putting this music together.
Absolutely. And did the process of writing Breaking Stretch teach you anything, either technically or creatively, that made its way into Of the Near and Far? Is there something that maybe you tried differently this time because of what you discovered or learned in Breaking Stretch?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things we're talking about taking challenges, with Breaking Stretch, one of the challenges that presented a lot was to create a sonic timbre, texture, or environment that wasn't necessarily, I guess, normal for that instrumentation. Like I wanted three horns to sound like a big brass ensemble. That's not usually what three horns do. So in this case, I'm using the same approach. So you have violin, you have, string quartet and so on, but and I'm not using the strings how you will normally use strings, and again, I'm sometimes I'm using them as an extension of a textural palette that the pianist is doing, or sometimes they're creating this kind of bed of sound that almost sounds electronic, which actually I forgot to mention one member, the electronic musician in this project, Arcturi. So he's kind of creating this interesting interludes, but also beds of sound sometimes for things. And there's also a track that kind of takes over a little bit more with the electronic aspect of this record. So this record, I wanted it to have this feel of electroacoustic, where you don't really know, wait, is that electronics or is that the violins? Like what's going on right now? So sometimes the strings have those textures where like it kind of almost sounds like it's a electronic pad, but no, it's the violoncello doing a written part. So again, creating those challenges where I'm trying to give instrumentalists or creating challenges within the orchestration and use it in unusual ways to create a bigger, different sonic palette. So.
So kind of wrapping up our conversation now, I wanted to ask another personal question. And so, especially as a woman and immigrant in the world of experimental jazz, how do you keep yourself grounded?
It's a good question. I mean, it's something that I think is it. It's hard to answer because I don't think there's like a one thing that you do. But I think I've always looked up to, strong women in this music. Like one of my, two of my greatest inspirations are Carla Bley and Jerry Allen. And I think about both of them and the time they came in this music. And I'm sure it was not easy. I'm sure if it's not easy now,
Right.
I can imagine. I can't imagine
Right.
what it was then, but something that was inspiring to me, and I was like, well, what did they do? They were incredible musicians, and their art was, first and foremost, and that was really what, in a sense, you know, they had to make a seat at the table for them because there was no other way to ignore their musical presence. So for me, it was like, that was really inspiring, just to reflect your strength as a woman also in the work that you do, because it will eventually be undeniable. They can shut your voice down when it's so strong. So to me that was something that, I was like, that's still at the end of the path, like that's what I'm striving for, the excellence that those two women brought to this music, and then just continue to strive for that. So it's, in a sense, it's kind of, it shuts all the noise around you, and if things happen where you get disencouraged, or you get whatever, just to kind of continue to looking at that shining light and turning that down, and then just kind of carve your way little bit by little bit, but it's a tricky thing, because it's obviously there's been challenges, I mean, in Mexico, I remember I wanted to play drum set, and literally the conservatory, like, they were like, no, that's not for girls. It's just, so
Wow.
my mom was like, what are you talking about? And she
Right.
made it happen. I mean, she's another huge influence of just seeing a woman. She was working as an electrical engineer, like doing installations in houses, wearing pants on, and she used to get so many, looks or criticized or whatever for what she was doing, but she just kept moving forward. So I think, in a sense, that's what I saw in Jerry, what I saw in Carla, where like they just kept moving forward with their music, they've kept creating, and eventually, it becomes undeniable that people have to pay attention. So yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy. So
But you are taking it in stride, and I know that there's probably countless musicians, and especially women musicians, who can say, like, look, if Patricia can do it, I can do it too. It
exactly, exactly.
is,
Yes.
especially, I host the Women in Jazz show on
Mhm.
KRTU every Thursday night. And so that is, I'm so pro woman. Like, I am all about women, championing women. And so I genuinely is my happy place every week to get on there and just play
Yeah.
women who I also look up to, and who
Yeah.
have who continue to write the music that heals and that provokes thought and movement and creativity, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for your gift.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.